Today we're going to be looking at the Latverian Legacy mod by Potato Fried 17. Now to start this mod you're going to have to head over here in Lookout Landing and talk to this guy. And our friend Roven here will tell us that the stone recently fell from the sky and asks us to find his glossary of ancient tongues that he lost during his last investigation, which he'll mark on our map. The location of his lost glossary is in the Thunderhead Isles. Now getting to this location will be a bit of a pain if you haven't already cleared out the isles, but if you have, simply fly up there and pick up his book. Once returned, he'll then give you another quest to fight an enemy in a different location, that being the Sage Temple Ruins. And once you've taken out the two Lizalfos, you'll meet this guy, who isn't your average Bokoblin. Now for starters, he has 545 health, a completely different appearance, mainly being black and red with also this stone looking helmet, very reminiscent of some of the Twilight Princess enemies. And while at first it may seem strange that the character has a Twilight Princess motif, the fact that the Bokoblin actually has a helmet / mask does kind of go along with the Doctor Doom concept. Now when fighting this enemy you're going to have to be careful. For starters, the electrical projectiles are going to cause a problem in this swampy area, although assuming you have a wooden shield you can parry them. It also might not be a bad idea to equip the rubber armor. Another thing you have to be careful of is the sapphire shield, which, assuming you're in melee range, if you then attack the shield and the Bokoblin blocks, you will get frozen. And unsurprisingly, the Bokoblin is immune to all the elements. What is super effective however is the Dazzle Fruit, which will cause it to drop both its sword and shield. You can also use things like the Puff Shroom, although you won't be able to crouch in this water, so sneak attacks aren't available. And if you're really struggling for whatever reason, you can use the Ancient Blade. But if you defeat them normally, they'll drop a diamond and a large Zonai charge. Another thing to note about this enemy is that they don't have a weak point, therefore shooting them in the head won't stun them. Meeting back up with Roven, he'll tell us he's made a great discovery with the texts, and to meet him back in his laboratory, which can be found in the Akala region. Now the laboratory itself is kind of off the map, so you will have to glide your way down there. And once there, we'll find his laboratory, which I believe is the same as the Hateno village laboratory, but this time only the top half is visible. Once we've spoken to Roven, he'll tell us the text is about a prophecy, and mentions a character called the Iron Tyrant, who doesn't sound like a particularly nice guy. He also mentions that 3 foundational pillars take place before the Iron Tyrant, those being the First Ember, the Silent Tear, and the Fallen Heart. We then quest with going after these 3 items, which will all be marked on our map. While they can be done in any order, the first one we're going to is in the Gerudo Highlands, more specifically the Gerudo Summit. Now once you get here, you'll find a handful of the new Bokoblins and a new Lynel. Now for the Bokoblins, I would recommend again throwing the Dazzle Fruits so you can disarm them. Now moving on to the main attraction, we have the new Lynel, which has 5000 HP. Now in terms of his appearance, it is similar to the Bokoblin, with it having some armor, a helmet, and mainly being black with red markings. Now something I forgot to mention earlier is that the Bokoblin enemies take 25% less damage from the two-handed weapons, and take 25% more damage from one-handed weapons. Our Lynel friend on the other hand takes normal damage from small weapons and 50% more damage from two-handed weapons. Now back to the actual fight, it is best to take out the Bokoblins first, although once you've disarmed them, they aren't too much of an issue, although the same can't be said for the Lynel. Now for the most part, the Lynel does work like your average Lynel, the major differences being that he can't be damaged by arrows whatsoever, and his fire-based attacks are now lightning-based attacks. So instead of a fireball, it's now a lightning ball, and instead of the explosion, it's now an electrical blast. Although these changes don't really make the fight more difficult, just different. If you're struggling with this fight, one effective method for dealing with the Lynel and his Bokoblins is to wear a full set of rubber armor and use Muddle Buds on the Lynel, who will quickly take care of the Bokoblins. After we've defeated the Lynel, he obviously drops his weapons and a diamond, and I'd advise you pick up the bow as we're going to be needing it quite soon. And inside the chest we get the Fallen Heart, which is a 60 damage fuse that looks just like a star fragment, only it has a slightly purpley pinkish tint, but other than that has the exact same effects as a normal star fragment. Now moving on to the next enemy in the quest, we have to go to the Farron region and go to the Floria Bridge. And if you teleport to the nearby shrine, you'll see the new enemy we're going to be fighting. That being the Royal Gleeok, who has 8000 HP. Now just like all the other monsters we've looked at, this Gleeok has a helmet, or helmets, which prevents him from taking extra damage from headshots. Now compared to the other enemies we've looked at today, he does look quite different. For starters, he has a green glowing outline, along with what kind of look like green veins along his body. He also has these horn looking ornaments on his left and right head. Now in terms of combat, this guy is an absolute menace. For starters, he's probably going to be pushing you off the bridge, which is going to be super difficult to climb as it is raining. And while you can disable his heads as you normally would, it takes longer as you're not actually hitting a weak spot. Outside of that though, this is a normal Gleeok fight. My main suggestion would be, obviously wear rubber armor, but also try and position yourself and the Gleeok in such a way that if you get hit, you won't be falling off the bridge. Another thing to note, if you disable the Gleeok while it's above water, it will still take fall damage, as instead of swimming or floating, it simply falls through the water and hits the ground. And once you've defeated the Gleeok, although hopefully not over the water like I did, it'll drop the normal items of a Thunder Gleeok, along with a chest. Although this chest may be a little bit difficult to get to if it landed in the water. But with some help from hoverstones, you should be able to grab it. And inside the chest we get the Silent Tear, which has a fuse attack power of 60 and looks rather similar to a star fragment, but this time with a turquoise tinge. Our next enemy is found in the depths and to the west of the Ruto Canyon mine. The enemy in question is a Grand Hinox, which again is visually similar to the Bokoblins and Lynel, having a black body with red markings and again another helmet. Now in terms of his stats, he has 3000 HP, has no weak spots so you can't hit it in the eye, takes 90% less damage from any arrows, takes 25% more damage from thrusting weapons, i.e. spears, and takes double damage from bombs. And obviously has all of the elemental resistances too. Now this fight is potentially one of the easiest. For the two Bokoblins, you can just use a Dazzle Fruit to take their weapons. And for some unknown reason, the Hinox is also affected by the Dazzle Fruit permanently, meaning once they're hit by it, they will stay on the floor permanently. But if you want to fight the Hinox fairly, the easiest thing to do is allow it to pick up a tree and then dodge its attacks. Another thing to make this fight easier is that the Master Sword will remain in its powered up state during this fight. And once defeated, the Lynel will drop a bunch of meat, a diamond, and a chest, which contains our last item, the First Ember, which again has a fuse power of 60 and looks just like a star fragment with a very slight tinge of orange. It also again has all the same effects as a normal star fragment. Once we've got all three materials, we can return back to Roven. Roven then tells us that there's a great power when you combine the three pieces, and that a new evil anomaly has been reported coming from the stone in Lookout Landing. We then combine the three pieces and are given the Sovereign Mask, Mantle of Sorcery, and the Greaves of Dominion. The armour itself is clearly the creator's take on Doom's armour, and I don't think I've mentioned yet that this mod has aspects relating to Doom, the Marvel Comics character. Anyway, as I was mentioning, the armour is a mix of Doom's armour from the comics and the Zonai styled armours, with it having blue and green glowing sections, and obviously the whole iron mask. And like any other good armour mod, it also comes with a cape. Where this armour really shines Sploosh! Is in the dark, as multiple parts of the armour, including the eyes, glow in the dark. In terms of mixing and matching different pieces, any headpiece that doesn't make changes to the neck or the shoulders works rather well. The chest piece, however, does have much higher shoulders than your average piece of armour, which means the helmet on its own does look rather odd when combined with vanilla armour sets. So personally, I'd recommend wearing the armour as a set, and as you saw earlier, each piece provides a level of shock resistance and has an armour rating of 4 for each piece. You can upgrade it rather easily with the large Zonai charges and shards of Ferocious Fang. And once maxed out, the armour will have an armour rating of 20 for each piece. Also, as a full set bonus, which I think also requires you to have the armour upgraded to at least level 2, Link will now produce an electrical shock, whenever he takes damage, stunning most enemies and dealing 220 damage. Once we've got to Lookout Landing, we can then interact with the stone, which teleports us to a new location, which is effectively a custom shrine called the Fragmented Dimension, which is full of floating platforms, strange green rocks, some of the modded enemies we fought earlier, and loads of wizrobes. Now since this is a shrine, there are some things that you won't be able to use while inside of here. For example, dropping Zonai devices. So if you want to make any rocket shields, which are quite useful, do them before entering. Now a reason you might want the rocket shields is because of the wizrobes, as entering bullet time and then using the various elemental fuses is a quick way to deal with them. And while there are 2 modded Hinoxes, a modded Lynel and a modded Gleeok, you don't actually have to fight any of them. Instead, you can go straight to the bottom and fight these custom Gloomhands, which are now a bright green colour, and look like they're made up of energy. Now like me, you may be slightly confused when you fight these enemies. The reason for this is that the one-handed weapons don't deal any damage to them, which led me to throwing the explosive elemental items at them. However, both spears and two-handed weapons deal normal damage against them, and assuming you have a good fuse, they're actually pretty easy to defeat. And once you've defeated the tentacles, you get the final boss, Emperor Doom, the Supreme Iron Tyrant, who looks much closer to the normal Doctor Doom you'd expect from the various comics. He also floats around with his legs crossed, and magically just has his sword floating in front of him. And in terms of stats, he has 5000 HP, takes 75% less damage from arrows, 75% less damage from small weapons, and normal damage from thrusting weapons and two-handed weapons. His actual moveset is based off the Phantom Ganon enemy, and although you can't see it, there is actually gloom on the floor as well. Now in terms of advice for fighting this enemy, I would treat it rather like a normal Phantom Ganon fight. Realistically, you want to be using a spear or a two-handed weapon, otherwise you'll be doing very little damage. He also can move actually quite fast, and some of his attacks are also really fast. Some of his attacks he also doesn't telegraph that much, which can make them difficult to dodge. They'll also sometimes give off this electrical blast effect. One thing that did make this fight quite a bit easier, with a lot of his attacks it was quite easy to pull off a flurry rush, even when you're dodging no way near the actual attack. And once defeated, you'll be able to pick up his weapons, those being the Mystic Blade, the Mystic Bow, and Mystic Barrier. You can also actually find the Mystic Barrier in the area itself, although it is guarded by the Lynel. And like some of the other enemies, he'll also drop a diamond. And first we'll look at the weapon, the Mystic Blade, which just like a Zonai weapon has a retractable blade. Although this blade looks a lot more solid than your average squiggly Zonite sword. I believe the actual shape of the blade is the Gerudo Claymore, although it does also have what looks like some Zonai text on the actual blade. Now to go over its stats, it has a base attack of 30 and a durability of 60. It also has all the effects you'd expect from a Zonai weapon, but it also has the increased flurry rush damage and an electrical effect, which you could also combine with the other elements. And the last effect is the Gerudo double damage fuse effect, making any material attached to this weapon twice as strong. My favourite thing about this weapon, however, is the way it shines shortly after being activated. Now sadly, like with most Zonai weapons, the blade will completely disappear when you fuse something to it, but it's actually still a fairly good weapon even without a fuse. Moving on to the Mystic Bow, it deals 60 damage and has a durability of 400, and it also fires 5 arrows at once. It also looks very similar to the Dusk Bow, just with a different colour scheme. We do however get a different quiver for the bow. The bow also has the Zonite bow effects, allowing you to charge up the bow to dramatically increase the range. It also strangely has the bone property, meaning if you have an armor set which has the armor set bonus of bone proficiency, it will do much more damage. Now we're moving on to the shield, the Mystic Barrier, which again is based off a Zonite shield, and produces this pattern when drawn, although I'm not sure what the pattern actually is. In terms of its stats, it has a guard rating of 90 and a durability of 60. Outside of that, the shield has the normal Zonai shield effects, and has a similar effect to what a shield would have when it has a sapphire attached, freezing any enemies after it's hit. A side effect of this, however, is that the shield will produce an icy blast when unpausing the game, although you need the effect to at least go off before. In terms of damage, the effect does around 130 damage, and allows you to be one of the few people who's actually killed an enemy by simply pausing the game. It can also kind of light up dark areas. Now we've got the weapons out the way, we can return back to Roven, who more or less tells us that the enemies, including the ones inside the Fragmented Dimension, will respawn after a blood moon. And with that, the final quest is finished. But there is one last thing to go over, that being that there is a Patreon version of the mod, which changes the appearance of the weapon, shield and armour. Now first looking at the armour, it actually looks just like the stuff the boss was wearing. It is much closer to Dr. Doom's normal attire, with it having metal pieces of armour on the arms and legs. In terms of mixing and matching, it does actually work slightly better than the original set, with the chest piece reminding me of the Ocarina of Time tunic. Now what allows this set to work better with other armours is the fact that the shoulders are a little bit lower, which means there isn't a massive gap between the hood and any of the vanilla armours. Next we have the sword, which no longer has the energy blade and is a completely metal sword. And lastly we have the shield, which instead of the 2 wings on the side is now just a complete circle. Now if you want to check out the mod we've looked at today, you can find a link to it in the description below. There'll also be a link to the Patreon version. Please consider liking the video and subscribing, and I'll see you for the next one.